Hi, and welcome to the risks of interconnectivity in the age of COVID-19. From automobiles to mobile phones, what you need to be worried about now. An HMG Strategy webinar powered by RangeForce. I'm Tom Hoffman at HMG Strategy, and I'll be your moderator for today's event. Our speakers today are Dr. Charlie Miller, a security research expert who has extensive experience working on autonomous vehicle security systems, and Taavi Must, CEO of RangeForce. Charlie and Taavi, thanks so much for joining us today. So in our discussion today, we'll be talking about the current state of risks and threats facing personal and IoT devices, along with the changes that those threats caused by rapid digital transformation and work from home models. We'll explore the status of development efforts that are facing IoT and security systems, and what's working and what isn't. We'll dive into the best practice of SOC teams to secure personal and IoT devices in rapidly changing work environments. And then finally, we'll explore strategies and best practices in developing a lasting security culture, from the SOC to development based on Charlie's extensive research into organizations and trainings. This will be followed by a Q&A with our audience. And as a reminder, all attendees will receive an archived version of the webinar following the recording. So at this point, I'd like to hand it off to Taavi to share the trends that he's currently seeing in the IoT environment and to bring Charlie into the conversation as well. Taavi?
Yeah, thank you so much, Tom. Yeah, I think it's in IoT worlds, we kind of seeing the same trends what we see in security. It's in cyber as a whole. I think it's all start from understanding what our threats and be prepared against them. And obviously because of RangeForce, where we do our trainings on our live system, live servers, then we see that this preparedness is very important, not only for the people who actually like defense systems, but also for the people who design systems and build systems. So if what we see is that if you are better prepared from beginning, obviously the better results you have. But there are certain challenges from in IoT world, which are specific to IoT, obviously. And we're going to discuss those questions today with Charlie. So hi, Charlie. Thank you for joining us for this interview.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me. It should be fun.
Yeah, it's great to see you again, and I think every time we talk, you're working something very interesting. So let's start from here. So tell us what's on what you are working and what's on top of mind.
Sure. So I've been in the security field for a long time, but it seems like pretty recently, but I guess it's been a while now. I've been doing focusing on car security, so the security of connected cars, and to me, it's like a really interesting topic because I would write exploits for, mail clients or for web browsers or whatever, and I would want to show that off to people. And there's not much to show. So it's not like Hollywood where you get to see a lot of cool stuff going on. It's like, hey, look, here's an exploit and I can do this, but it's not exciting. And so the thing that makes IoT and even more so cars to me interesting as a security thing is just the impact you can have. So if you do manage to compromise a car, then you're doing things like controlling the brakes or making the steering wheel turn or like, very physical things that you can easily demonstrate are bad. So it's one thing to talk about someone stealing all your photos, but if you can show that you can hack into a car and drive it off the road, like that's something that is very easy to demonstrate is bad and scary and we need to work on. So that's something that's been in one of my interests for a long time, and so I've been still doing that, still following up on all the research that's going on in that space, and I plan to stay there for a while because I just find it so interesting.
I guess there are multiple players in this field, and can you just point out what's the difference of the companies who do it really well and companies who are not doing it so well?
Yeah, it's really hard in some spaces there's a lot of transparency as far as, or you can just look at the code. And I mean, for one thing, it's always kind of hard to measure security to start with. So to look at a product and say whether it's secure or not is pretty difficult. And I don't know if anyone really has a good way to do that. And looking at cars, there's one more level of difficulty in that car companies tend to not be real transparent about what they're doing or what sort of security mechanisms they're doing. Like you don't see a white paper coming out from a car company very often. And that's one of the reasons that Chris and I should mention Chris Valsek is the guy who did the car research with me, that we published everything we could. So about when we hacked into a Jeep, which we can talk about, we published everything about how it worked and the vulnerabilities and what we found. And if you want to know about progress since then, like I think that's kind of what your question was getting at. I don't know, I don't work real closely with the car companies or anything, but I know for one thing is that when we hacked into the Jeep, we hacked into, sorry, my cat's in the way here. We hacked into the Jeep's head unit, like the radio, and then we were able to send messages to like the brakes and the steering and everything like that. And since that time, they've added a module in between, a gateway module, so that acts as a firewall between those two. So you can, even on the outside, like the position I'm at is I'm on the outside. I don't know what's going on exactly inside the car companies, but I do see progress even in that field going on. So they've added components to make the architecture of the cars more secure. So I'm pretty optimistic that cars are getting more secure, and hopefully that's a good thing.
But you're saying that we have like two type of problems here. Technical threats, obviously specific to cars, self-driving cars, for example, and then also like organizational, that how we share information and how we deal with the things.
Yeah, definitely. And then in the car world, things are complicated too, in that like a car company doesn't just build everything that's in a car. They have suppliers that provide individual components, and then they assemble it into a car. And so if you think about the security of the vehicle, it's difficult for one company to really maintain the level of security of the car, because they have to make sure that the parts they're getting from the suppliers are also secure. And those suppliers probably have suppliers for themselves. And so there's this whole wide chain of developers and engineers and testers that go into making sure that all the components in a car are secure. And so it's much more complicated than like securing a web browser, which, yeah, it's a team of developers, but they all work for the same company at least. It's quite a daunting task to think about this field.
And what about then self-driving cars? So again, all our cars have electronic components, and the security is becoming issue anyhow. But what about self-driving? So is that like probably just amplifying everything you just told, or what's your view?
Yeah, so self-driving cars are really interesting. So Tesla kind of has one, but for the most part, it's something that we don't really have yet. We don't have full self-driving cars. We'll get there soon, hopefully. I work for a company that's trying to make them, so I really am invested in them that they work someday. But from a security perspective, they're the next level in that you have even more control over the car. So like when we hacked into the Jeep, they had some automation. So they had systems in the Jeep that would allow you to, so if you started to drift out of your lane, it would steer you back into your lane. That's called lane keep assist. And so there was a computer that could kind of control the steering. And then there was computers in the car that if it sensed you were going to hit something, hit another car, hit a wall, it would apply the brakes to try to save you. It's called collision prevention. And again, that's a computer in the car that can do something with the brakes. And that's the things that as an attacker, we took advantage of. So once we were able to infiltrate the car's systems, then we could use those computers to control the brakes and the steering. It's even more so in a self-driving car, because the Jeep that we attacked, it wasn't designed to drive itself. It just had systems to help the driver, help a human driver. And so if you take the human out and the systems completely control the car and are designed to do that, if an attacker ever got control of that, it would allow them to do even more stuff than we were able to do. So it's very important. Like we won't be able to launch self-driving cars unless we're very, very confident that they're secure.
So it's not only safety aspects, but very strongly there is also like cybersecurity aspect of self-driving driving cars, right?
Yeah, for any connected car, there's basically, there's certainly safety and security, but you can't have safety without security. If you can't trust that the code running on the car is from the company and it's not from a bad guy, then you can't have safety anymore. So they're very tightly entangled. There's certainly some safety things that don't have anything to do with security, but if you don't have cybersecurity in the car, you don't have safety.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, but what about devices that are a little bit smaller than cars, but where security is still like very, very relevant? Well, obviously we've heard a lot of stories how organizations are moving to work 100% remotely from homes, and questions how to really secure corporate laptops and connections and VPNs and everything around that. But I guess that we have also like number of phones and tablets around us, and they probably got a little bit less attention from security teams. So what about that? So how to secure or how to address that situation with COVID-19 with the devices like tablets and phones?
Sure. So any company that had a real traditional security model of, a big firewall and a very protected corporate enterprise, and they don't let anyone from the outside in, they definitely struggled when everyone went remote because now everyone's connecting from the outside. They have their computers, they have their phones and their tablets, and they still need to access all the internal services that the enterprise offers. And so that's going to be, hopefully companies already were thinking of that and they have systems set up like that, but if not, they're in quite a bit of trouble. But specifically with mobile devices, so this is something I looked at a long time ago. In fact, I was the first one to hack the iPhone when it came out, and also the first one to hack an Android phone when it came out. So back in the day, I knew a lot about cell phones. I've switched a bit to cars, but I still know some stuff. So the thing about cell phones that's sort of interesting is they're typically pretty secure because they're not designed like computers are designed to have like multiple users and that sort of the security model is a little different. Where a phone, you can just really lock it down because no one expects to be able to just type random stuff and have it work on a phone. So typically phones are more secure than devices. The exception is all the apps you can get. So if you look at if you're downloading just a bunch of apps to your phone, especially if you have like Android and you can get them from random app stores and stuff, it makes it so now instead of trusting the developers from Apple or Google, you're gonna have to trust all the developers from these random companies that have these apps. And that is, the phones themselves trying to protect you from the apps a bit, but still you're just certainly running code that was written by developers that you don't necessarily trust as much as you would, the phone suppliers.
So do you have any advice to all of us who use phones every day? So how careful you have to be with apps there, or what you watch, or?
Yeah, it's like I mentioned, the good news is that phones typically are more secure than computers. So if you're going to shoot yourself in the foot, it's probably going to be something you do on your computer as opposed to your phone. But I mentioned earlier, you only get stuff from trusted sources on your iPhone. That's easy. Out of the box, it only trusts Apple. And if you want, if you're really, really paranoid, only get apps that have lots and lots of downloads. So if you're the first one to download an app, that's probably a bad sign that it might not be quite as trusted. Both Google and Apple try to vet the apps before they give them to you. So there's some level of scrutiny on the apps before you get a chance to get them. But if you stay away from those super obscure apps, you're probably in better shape than otherwise.
So you say that if you would try to research security of the mobile phones again, you would write an app then?
So yeah, if I wanted to research mobile phone security, the first thing I would do would jailbreak my phone. So so don't do that. That basically turns off all the security. So it used to be something people did a lot because they wanted different wallpapers and stuff. Luckily, a lot of the reasons why people jailbreak their phones, the phone companies or Apple or whoever has provided those sort of features for you. So there's not too much reason besides pirating games or something that you would do that, but don't do that. That's one recommendation. Don't install like profiles from other companies. Like if you work for a company, you have to install software that company, your IT staff gives you. So don't do that for like just, if your friend tells you to install this thing, don't do that. Those are just things that turn off the security. The less you do, the better you are.
But say that I have a bad intention to really to get into somebody's phone, then probably I would write a like attractive app and try to get that somehow to the phone. So kind of role of, and that's kind of a critical point here, right? So that it's easiest, yeah.
Yeah, so
Which,
it's definitely the equivalent of getting someone to download some executable and on your computer.
yeah,
You can make an app that does stuff that's bad, and like I said, there's some chance that Google or Apple will catch that and not allow it, but there's a good chance they probably won't too. And so yeah, if you just write an app that steals all the context and emails it off, like that's something that it's allowed to do if you give it the proper permission. So that is one way you could attack a phone for sure.
yeah, and that's may happen if I really like know how to attack. But is it true also that if I don't know anything about security and not trained, then it effectively, the same can happen, right?
Oh yeah, for sure. So if developers, I mean, and that happens. There's definitely cases where people have or apps have done things that I would consider security threats that attackers would do. The apps were just doing what they thought they needed to do because developers don't necessarily know or don't have training in security or privacy or anything. And so they're like, hey, I need a way to find other users of this app. So I'll just upload the person's contacts and
Yeah.
I can do some database searching on my end. And yeah, that's true. That works, but I don't necessarily want apps to do that. That's from my perspective, them taking my data because they needed it or they thought they needed it is the same as an attacker taking my data because they wanted it. So it's important that developers understand that users have certain expectations for the protection of their data that they should respect.
Yeah, it seems really that training of developers here is like has a crucial importance that makes sure that they can do things all in right way and in secure way. And obviously we at RangeForce we thinking a lot about that. And I think in software development, as we have seen that movement and raising awareness to build more secure code and train developers more. But now we move to like IoT, away from devices, but IoT world. So I've seen one security researcher talk to a security researcher who showed me camera feed from somewhere from Florida, from like home security system. So do you see the same kind of training approach, raising awareness also in community of IoT, in IoT community?
Unfortunately not. And I think one of the big reasons is that if you look at something like web browsers, which is something I attacked a lot a while back. So web browsers are made, what are there 5 web browsers that basically make up 99% of the market. And so if Google wants to secure Chrome, they can put all their efforts to do that. And Microsoft wants to secure Internet Explorer or the Edge or whatever, they can do that. But then if you start to look at IoT devices, you don't have 5 big players anymore that can put resources into that. You have thousands and hundreds of thousands of tiny small companies making tiny small devices whose maybe it's the very first thing they've done. Maybe they have to get something out the door extremely quick for competitive reasons. Maybe they don't have the resources to have a security person on staff or to train their developers. And so it's a whole nother world when you're talking about these little embedded devices as opposed to the software we typically use every day, like word processors or something, where there's just a few. And so like it's possible for companies to actually secure those, where if I get I don't know what kind of IoT device you want to talk about, a juicer or something that's on the internet, like that company probably didn't put the same level of effort into security as Google or Apple or someone would have.
But again, we reached the point we kind of conclude that awareness and knowledge and skills are like crucially important, and not only on security side of the house, but also development side. So what's your view, how we can actually raise that awareness and around the security in IoT world?
Yeah, it's really difficult. So I mentioned before, I've been in security space for 15 years or something, and a lot has changed in that time. But the one thing that hasn't changed is figuring out the right people to hire and getting good quality trained people on your teams. And I've worked in lots of different companies, and that's always been a problem. And I think it's because you can't, like some other fields like accounting or something, you're like, oh, this person went to Harvard, so we can hire them, they're good. But there's nothing like that for cybersecurity, especially, or even developers generally. So it's more of, for us, it's like, okay, so what have you done? What have you made? What hands-on stuff have you done? And that's really where you learn the field, and that's where you can demonstrate that you know what you're doing. And so, and there's not enough of that. So when I'm looking to find someone, to hire someone, like for me, it's always like, show me what you've done. And it's difficult. There's just not, there's not enough people out there who have the necessary training, and it's very difficult to find the right people, unfortunately.
Yeah, I guess that the previous experience is very important, and certificates cannot always tell the whole truth. And in our practice, when we run those real world hands-on cyber battle simulations, we've seen people who have all the certifications in the world, but don't use so well there, and also quite opposite, that young people who have actually had hands-on experience and were tinkering on Raspberry Pi, they show like excellent results. So the hands-on experience seems to be very, very important in total skill set and also in awareness.
Yeah, absolutely. It's very difficult to look at a resume and see how good someone is when you just see like they're like they've read these books. Okay, well, that doesn't tell me anything. But if you can show me what they've done, hands-on, then that's all. If they've accomplished particular tasks, by themselves, then I know that they know what they're doing, and there's not enough of that out there.
And quickly, if I may ask that, how you started your career? Is it by the books or videos or hands-on perhaps?
Yeah, so I started a sort of untraditional way. I worked for the National Security Agency, and they trained me up. So I did it, everything was 100% hands-on. Luckily, I was in a program where for 3 years, I could basically just, learn by trial, learn by doing. And so by the end of those 3 years, I kind of knew what I was doing. And that's what allowed me to do it. So there was never a time when I read a bunch of books and thought I knew what I was doing. So it was always like, hey, try this. How's this work? What's this? How do I do that? And I wish I could do that. Oh, look, now I can do it. And so it was purely all 100% hands-on. So maybe that's why I'm such a proponent of that technique. But for me and working in the industry for a while, that seems to be the way that you can get success.
Yeah, definitely. We totally share that view with you, of course. Now, but thinking about IoT, the one side is to build IoT device, but then you have your manufacturing company and people who actually use those devices. So, and probably now the role of the security team is going to change as well. So they still have to monitor the systems and make sure that they get all the events and react also to the events. So what about what is your view on monitoring and protecting side of IoT?
So, I mean, I mentioned some of the bad things about IoT is that there's higher risk and that they can physically affect things sometimes. And also that you have so many different companies involved that makes it a little bit harder. But some of the things that the good news of IoT is that, you're still writing code. So there's still developers writing code for them. You still have to attack them the same way. So the types of attacks against IoT devices are really identical to the types of attacks we do against phones or computers or anything else. And the types of traffic that attackers would have to send to and from it are still very similar to, or the same as you would against a computer. And so from someone who's monitoring these devices, you monitor them, there's more of them, but still you monitor them like they're computers or phones. And so the type of training or the type of skills you need to monitor a network that has IoT devices isn't much different from a network that doesn't have those. So we can use a lot of the same knowledge and skill sets we've developed to monitor corporate networks, to monitor networks that also include IoT devices, and the same for development. So if we know how to develop securely on a computer, we can probably develop securely for an IoT device. So there's a lot of overlap in those two, and so that's really good, and that's promising.
Do you think that at one day car manufacturer will have the best security operations teams in the world because they have to monitor then every single car?
Well, I hope that they have good ones at least. How about that? Yeah, so I hope a lot of industries have very good security teams and can monitor. And like you said, monitoring is very important because no matter how hard we work at writing secure software, no matter how well we deploy security technologies, there's still going to be moments where things break down and attackers have some success. And so a big part of a successful security strategy is being able to know when that's happened. So if you can detect that an attack has happened successfully and you can react to that quickly, you can have a chance to get that attacker out of your network or out of your device before they can do any damage. And that's just as good as if they never succeeded in the attack. So it definitely being able to monitor your network and devices for attacks is an extremely important part of any security strategy.
So we know that a couple of brands in car industry are very focused on safety, but I guess that one day security can be one of the decision criteria for buyers too.
I hope that is not the case, because I hope all cars are are secure. But yeah, I don't know if that's ever going to happen, but yeah, I mean, we don't have any data on that right now for sure. But it's in my mind, I want all cars to be secure. I don't want to see newspaper stories about cars getting hacked and people getting hurt or anything like that. So yeah, cats being crazy. Yeah, so hopefully cars will all the car companies will work. I mean, they all realize that this is important, and they don't want to be on the newspaper because their car got hacked and some of their customers got hurt. So I think that they realize this is important, and that's one of the reasons Chris and I did the research in 2015, is to raise awareness, especially with car companies. So they've had 5 years now to implement security. I hope that's what's happened, and I hope that the cars that we drive in are really secure.
Sure. And yeah, so let's finish with something more entertaining, Charlie. So you worked so many years in cyber. Perhaps you can share a couple of stories, more interesting or outrageous, perhaps, with us.
Let's see. I can give you a car one, and then if there's time, you can ask more. I can talk stories all night. So this is what I do on a Friday night. Is me and my buddies talk stories about various hacking things we've done. So here's one. So before the GPAC, which we did in 2015, Chris and I did some research against Ford and Toyota vehicles just to see how they work, how an attacker would send messages, how much, like at that time, no one really knew how much you could physically control a car. So now we know, of course, from the Jeep, you can turn the steering wheel and turn the brakes, but we didn't necessarily know that back then. So one of the things we were doing, or one of the things I was doing, was I was sending messages to the brakes to make the brakes not work. The exact, you might say, like, why is there a message you can send the brakes to say don't work? And there isn't one that says that, but there is a message you can send that says, hey, I'm a mechanic. I want to work on the brakes. I want to bleed out all the fluids to do that, all the brake fluid. So I would send that message to the car while it's driving, and if you bleed out the brake fluid, then the brakes don't work. So it had the same effect. But that particular attack only worked if you're going kind of slow. So the car companies had thought about this and said, like, hey, we probably don't want this particular message to be processed if you're going more than 5 miles an hour. Like, I don't know why they didn't make it 0 miles an hour, but they didn't. So anyway, if you're driving 0 to 5 miles an hour, or 7 or something like that, I could send this message and then your brakes don't work, and then you can't go any slower than 5 or 7 miles an hour. And so to test that, I would drive around and I would send the message, and I would see the brakes weren't working, and then I would either stop sending the message or I would just speed up. So if you sped up, then the brakes would work again. So which seems sort of weird. Anyway, so I was driving around my neighborhood testing this out, and I kind of trained myself that, see if the brakes don't work. If they don't work, speed up, right? So in my head, I trained myself, when your brakes don't work, speed up. So this will be important to the story. So this message works. Testing's done. I'm going home. So I'm going home, and I'm really stupid. I forget to turn off the message, right? So I'm still saying this message, but I forgot. So I turn into my driveway, and I go to apply the brakes, and they don't work. And so by my training, I speed up. And so now I'm going very fast into my driveway, and I know if I slow down, the brakes don't work. And so I'm like, what am I going to do? And so I look, and to my left is my house, and to my right is my wife's car. And straight ahead is the garage. And so I'm like, well, I guess I'll just keep going straight. So I'm flying down my driveway, and my brakes aren't working, and I'm panicking. I don't know what to do. So at the very last second, I just jam my car into park, and I just smash into the back of the garage. and I stopped. But I don't know exactly why I stopped. If it was the hitting the wall, if it was the park, whatever. But it was a bad scene, and I had smashed up all my stuff in my garage, and I hurt, like my garage, the wall is kind of bent out and stuff. And I called my buddy Chris, who I've been doing the research with. I was like, oh, Chris, I just got into an accident, because of the stupid brake messages. And he's like, oh, that's really great. So one of the things about being a car hacker is like, when you crash your car because you hacked it, like that's actually a success. But no one was hurt. My lawnmower was destroyed, but for the most part, that's the trials and tribulations of being a car hacker.
Well, yeah, and hopefully cars, because of that accident, actually getting more safe and secure. So
exactly. Like, so an easy fix for that is that message only works if you're going 0 miles an hour. There, I saved y'all from crashing into your garage like I did.
Yeah, sounds really easy. Right. So Charlie, thank you so much for taking that time with us, and really greatly appreciate it. Thank you so much. Tom, I know we have a lot of questions, so let's open the discussion.
We do. Thanks, Taavi. And thanks for a terrific discussion. Really learned a lot. I think it underscores the risks facing both consumers and companies as well with respect to IoT. So we'll open the audience Q&A at this point. If you'd like to submit a question to our speakers, scroll down to the Q&A function on your device, enter your question, and then hit submit. And if we don't get to your question today, we will respond to all questions by email. So Charlie, this first question is for you, and Taavi, if you could follow afterwards. What are the greatest risks facing IoT sensors and equipment in manufacturing? Can you describe what an attack might look like?
Sure. So IoT devices are, like we mentioned earlier in the talk, they've got some special risks involved with them. One is that they can physically impact the world sometimes. So if you hack a web browser, you can steal someone's photos maybe, but if you hack a device that controls the thermostat, you can make the room hot or cold. Or if you hack into a device that controls an industrial robot or something, you can make it do something that is unexpected. And so there's higher risk involved, but the types of attacks are still very similar. The one attack that kind of, and the other thing is you might have a very secure network of computers, and your typical enterprise type stuff is very secure. And then you throw in some IoT devices that aren't secure, and that can lead to insecurity in your whole network, because attackers can attack that device. And even if it doesn't do anything physical, it still might allow them to then pivot into your network. And there's a well-discussed case that happens where in Las Vegas, this is the story, at least, I don't know if I fully believe it, but the story goes that someone attacked a thermostat that was in a fish tank in a casino. And then once they had access to that device was on the internal corporate network. And then they were able to steal the high roller database from the casino. And so, so this IoT device allowed them to pivot into the internal network.
Yeah, and if I may add, I guess it's in traditional IT world, the patching or fixing the problems is relatively easy. It's not always possible, but relatively easy. In physical world, it is naturally a little bit more harder. So it's I guess we have to be just, again, even more careful when we design and build those IoT devices.
That's a great point, Taavi, that a lot, like our computers, most of the software we depend on every day have the way to auto-update themselves. But for IoT devices, that's not the case. So many IoT devices don't have a way to update themselves.
Excellent points. Thanks. So Taavi, security professionals often talk about the need to address security on the front end of development efforts as opposed to, applying a bolt-on approach. Can you offer some recommendations for doing this with IoT devices and applications?
Well, again, if we just compare it to traditional IT, I think the same principle pretty much apply here. That the question is really when we start to think about cybersecurity in the life cycle of IoT device, or it's pretty much the same. When we should start to think about fire safety of the building. So it's not probably like when the building is ready. So it starts much earlier, and probably the reason why Great Fire of London was so devastating wasn't really that they didn't have enough water in Thames or even firefighters, but the town was built in this way that it was almost hard to stop. So with IoT, I think that pretty much the same. It's awareness of developers, skill set of developers and architects, and also people who actually set requirements. So the business side to make sure that security is there, and then it actually comes pretty naturally. And I don't think that from engineering point of view, it needs like I think it's harder to bolt it on later, to add it to rather than just like start in right way from the beginning. I think it aligns a lot with the good engineering practices. So it's not something extra. I guess it's awareness and mindset question from very early in the process.
Yeah, in your analogy of the SDLC being, when do you do the security part of it? And some companies don't think about the fire until the fire is blazing. So yeah, the earlier you can do it, the better. Like you said, it's cheaper, it's easier. Everything about it is better, except you have to think to do it, and it might cost a little more. But as far as ease of the types of things you're going to have to do, and how much effort that's going to be, and how effective it's going to be, the earlier the better in the process.
Great points, thanks. Taavi, you spent an earlier part of your career working with the NATO Cyber Defense Center. Can you share with us some of the lessons that you've learned from those experiences?
Oh yeah, absolutely. So my team members and our team helped you to build cyber range for NATO technical exercises, and also also being there for designing those exercises and also competing there from different. So, but one thing what we really learned from that experience was that the defense is really hard. So what we have seen is that people who are security experts are really good in hacking side. They may have real difficulty to defend, and some of the great teams there who participated like first time had really trouble to defend against professional red teams. So I guess it's our what we learned from there was that to be able to defend, you really need to learn how to defend. You need to understand how the attack works, that's for sure, but then you have to do extra mile and go to defense side and try to really defend your system against the real attacks. And that's kind of a knowledge, and not only knowledge, but skill set, which you can't get otherwise. It needs just the practice. So I think that's the main one.
Excellent, thanks. And Charlie, for attendees of the webinar, can you share with us the key takeaways that they should be walking away with, be thinking about with respect to IoT and security?
Sure. I've said this a couple times, but the main thing about IoT devices is because of the way they're made, and they're made by so many different companies, and they're typically smaller. These companies, they're probably not going to be as secure as the software and devices that we typically use. And so you need to prepare for that. And the way you can prepare for that is to make sure that you do a lot of monitoring of these devices, that you can react to them. So if you notice that your IoT juicer is sending traffic to your laptops, like that's probably not what it's supposed to do. And so you know that something's happened. And so you can't necessarily, if you're just an enterprise, you can't necessarily improve the security of these IoT devices. But what you can do is segregate them from the important critical data and monitor them closely and react to any sorts of attack. So if you're worried about IoT devices in your environment, that's what I would recommend.
Fantastic. Well, Charlie and Taavi, thank you so much for sharing your insights with us today.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's been fun.
Thank you.
This concludes the risks of interconnectivity in the age of COVID-19. From automobiles to mobile phones, what you need to be worried about, an HMG strategy webinar powered by RangeForce. Thanks for joining us today and have a great day.